October 7th, 1957, Huntsville State Penitentiary, Texas. A young Johnny Cash heard words that would change his music forever. Before he was famous, before the black clothes, before the legend, there was this night. Write in the comments, where are you listening to this story from? And what time is it right now? An inmate named William Bible Bill Harrison approached the makeshift stage during intermission. What he whispered to Cash in those 45 seconds would inspire the darkest song ever written. But first, Cash had to survive the rest of that concert. Cash was 25 years old. "I Walk the Line" had given him a taste of success. But he wasn't a legend yet, just a young man with a guitar, a growing pill habit he was trying to hide, and a 2-year-old marriage to Vivian that was already showing cracks. The prison officials didn't even want him there. They'd wanted Ernest Tubb, but Tubb canceled last minute, and Cash was available. Cheap, too. $50 for the night. The drive from Memphis to Huntsville took 11 hours in Cash's 1954 Plymouth. Luther Perkins and Marshall Grant, his Tennessee 2 bandmates, slept most of the way, but Cash couldn't sleep. Something pulled at him about this show. Maybe it was the letter he'd received a week earlier, forwarded by Sun Records. No return address, just a Texas postmark and 5 words: "Please come, we need you." They arrived at 4 p.m. The Texas heat was brutal. 96 degrees in October. The prison looked like a medieval fortress, dropped in the middle of nowhere. Red brick walls, guard towers, razor wire catching the late afternoon sun like deadly tinsel. This wasn't Cash's first prison show, but it was his first maximum security facility. His first time performing for men who'd never leave. Warden James Whitmore met them at the gate, a former Army Colonel, Korea veteran. With eyes that had seen too much, "Mr. Cash," he said, shaking hands with a grip that could crack walnuts, "I need to be clear about something. These men aren't your typical audience. We house 800 of Texas's worst multiple murderers, cop killers, men who've done things that would turn your stomach. You sure about this?" Cash nodded, though his hand instinctively went to the pill bottle in his pocket. Just a little something to steady his nerves. Here's what the official records don't mention. There had been a suicide that morning. Inmate Thomas Garrett, serving life for killing his entire family, had hanged himself in his cell. The prison was on edge. The guards were jumpy. The inmates were locked in their cells, and Whitmore was considering canceling the show. But then William Harrison spoke up. "Stop. You need to understand who Bible Bill was, to understand why what happened next matters." William Bible Bill Harrison was 61 years old, had been in Huntsville since 1932, 25 years. He'd killed a man in a bar fight, claimed self-defense, but the all-white jury didn't care that Harrison was defending his sister from assault. They gave him life. In those 25 years, Harrison had become something unique in the prison ecosystem. A man both the guards and inmates respected. He ran the prison chapel, mediated disputes, and had personally talked 7 men out of suicide. When Harrison heard about Garrett that morning, and that Cash's show might be canceled, he went to the warden with a proposal: "Let the show go on. The men need this, especially today." Whitmore trusted Harrison. The show would proceed, but with conditions. No getting close to the inmates, no taking requests, no interaction beyond the performance. Cash agreed. The concert was set for the prison cafeteria, a massive room that smelled of industrial disinfectant and decades of despair. They built a small platform at one end, maybe 8 inches high. No proper stage, no curtains, no separation between performer and audience. 800 metal folding chairs arranged in perfect rows, guards stationed every 10 feet along the walls, rifles visible. At 7 p.m. sharp, the inmates filed in. Cash had performed for prisoners before, but this was different. These men moved differently, watched differently. There was a weight to their presence, like gravity had gotten stronger. They didn't talk or joke. They just sat and stared. Cash opened with Folsom Prison Blues. He'd written it 2 years earlier, after seeing a movie about Folsom, but he'd never performed it for actual prisoners. As he sang about violence and regret, the room went absolutely still, not silent, still, like 800 men had stopped breathing simultaneously. A man in the front row, facial scars telling their own story, mouthed along with every word, not singing, just mouthing, like a prayer or a confession. But the most shocking moment was still to come. Cash moved through his set list. "Hey Porter, get rhythm. There you go." The inmates gradually warmed up, some clapping along, but there was an undercurrent of something else, tension, like a wire stretched too tight, ready to snap. Luther Perkins missed a chord change, and the sound of chair legs scraping concrete filled the room as several inmates shifted. The guards tensed. Then came intermission. Cash stepped off the makeshift stage, heading for the bathroom the warden had designated for their use. That's when Harrison approached. He moved slowly, hands visible, aware that guards were watching. Harrison was a tall man, 6'4", with hands that looked like they could bend steel, but his eyes were gentle, almost sad. "Mr. Cash," Harrison said quietly, "I need 45 seconds of your time. Just 45 seconds. Cash looked at the nearest guard, who shrugged. "Talk," Cash said. What Harrison said next has never been fully documented until now. Pieced together from Cash's private journals, and a letter Harrison wrote, but never sent, found in his cell after his death in 1963. "Mr. Cash, you sing about killing and violence, but that's not really why men kill. I've been here 25 years, and I've known 300 killers, real killers, and not one of them killed for the reasons people think." Harrison moved closer, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "They kill because they're already dead inside. They kill because someone killed something in them first. Their hope, their child, their soul. They kill trying to feel alive again, or trying to make someone else feel what they feel. Your songs, they're clever, but they don't tell the whole truth, and these men have heard enough lies." Cash felt his anger rising. Who was this convict to critique his music? But Harrison wasn't done. "I killed a man named Robert Thompson on March 15, 1932. He was raping my 14-year-old sister. I beat him to death with my bare hands, and I listened to him beg, and I didn't stop, not because I wanted to watch him die, but because in that moment, his death was the only thing that could make her pain mean something." Cash's anger evaporated. "You want to write songs about killers?" Harrison continued. "Then tell the truth. Every man in this room is somebody's son. Most are somebody's father. They did terrible things, yes, but they were human beings before they became monsters, and most of them are trying to find their way back to being human again." Harrison pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper, yellowed with age. "This is something my cellmate wrote before he was executed last year. James Crawford killed 3 people in a robbery, but he spent his last 5 years teaching other inmates to read. These words, they're the truest thing about killing I've ever read." He handed the paper to Cash. 45 seconds are up. Thank you for listening." Harrison walked back to his seat, leaving Cash standing there, holding the paper. The words on it spoke of a man who'd taken lives and lost his own soul in the process, living as a ghost among the living, haunted by faces that would never leave him. Wait. This changes everything about what happened next. Cash went back on stage for the second half, but he couldn't get Harrison's words out of his head. He started his planned set, but midway through so doggone lonesome, he stopped, just stopped playing. Luther and Marshall looked at him, confused. "I want to try something," Cash said into the microphone. "Something different." What followed was unprecedented. Cash began to speak, not sing. He told the story Harrison had just shared with him. Without naming names, he talked about men who kill, not for pleasure, but from pain. He talked about the difference between the violence in songs and the violence that puts men in cages. The room was silent. The guards were shifting nervously. This wasn't what they'd agreed to. Then Cash did something that would haunt him for years. "How many of you," he said slowly, "killed someone you loved?" The silence that followed was deafening. Then slowly, hands started going up. 1, 5, 20, 50, more than 100 hands raised in that cafeteria. Warden Whitmore stood up, ready to end this, but Harrison caught his eye and shook his head slightly. Cash looked at those raised hands, and according to Luther Perkins's later testimony, tears were running down his face. The pills, the distance, the clever lyrics, none of it could protect him from this moment of raw truth. "Put your hands down," Cash said softly. "I'm going to sing something now. I don't know what it is yet. But just listen. Here's the detail that changes everything about Johnny Cash's career." Cash began to improvise, not a full song, but fragments, melodies that would later appear in Man in Black, A Hurt, The Man Comes Around. He was creating, in real time, the musical vocabulary he'd use for the next 45 years. Dark, haunting progressions that had never appeared in country music before. Minor keys that suggested redemption was possible, but never guaranteed. An inmate named Marcus Powell, sitting in the third row, started to sob. Not quiet tears, body-shaking sobs. He'd killed his wife in a jealous rage 5 years earlier and hadn't cried since. The man next to him, a convicted cop killer named Frank Torres, put his hand on Powell's shoulder. That's when the riot almost started. Guard Captain Dale Richards saw Torres touch Powell and assumed it was a fight starting. He moved in fast, baton raised. Other guards followed. The inmates saw guards moving with weapons and stood up, defensive. In seconds, the room went from church to potential battleground. Cash saw it happening. 800 convicted killers versus 30 armed guards. It would be a massacre. Without thinking, Cash started playing Amazing Grace, loud, almost violently loud, strumming so hard a string snapped, but he kept playing. One by one, the inmates started singing, not in harmony, 800 untrained voices, creating a sound that wasn't beautiful, but was absolutely honest. The guards froze. Whitmore held up his hand, ordering them to stand down. For 3 minutes, Huntsville State Penitentiary became something else. Not a prison, not quite a church. Something in between. A place where killers could sing about grace and mean it. When the song ended, Cash's right hand was bleeding from where the broken string had cut him. Blood on his guitar. Blood on the microphone. He didn't stop to bandage it. "I need to tell you all something," Cash said. "The man who approached me at intermission, he told me, you're all trying to find your way back to being human. I don't know if that's possible. I don't know if God forgives what can't be undone. But I know this, you're human right now. In this moment, you're human beings feeling something real." Then Cash made a promise that would define the rest of his career. "I'm going to keep coming back, not just here but to prisons everywhere, because what that man told me is true. You've heard enough lies. You deserve music that tells the truth about darkness, because you live in it, but also music that tells the truth about light, because maybe somehow you can still see it." The room erupted, not in violence, but in something rarer, in a maximum security prison, hope. But we're not done. The darkest part of this story was yet to come. As the inmates were filing out, carefully supervised by guards, one man stayed seated. Elijah Washington, 73 years old, the oldest inmate in Huntsville. He'd been there since 1911, 46 years. Cash noticed him, and against protocol walked over. "You okay, sir?" Cash asked. Washington looked up, with eyes that had seen the worst of humanity, including his own. "Mr. Cash," he said, his voice papery thin, "I've been here since before that boy was born." He pointed at Harrison. "I killed my brother, over $5. $5 I thought he stole, but he didn't. Found the money in my other pocket the day after I killed him." Cash didn't know what to say. "46 years I've been dying in here," Washington continued. "Tonight's the first time I felt alive. Thank you for that. But can I tell you something? A warning?" Cash nodded. "Don't come back here, son. This place, these places, they'll eat you alive. You got light in you. Don't let us darkness dwellers snuff it out. We're grateful for tonight. But don't sacrifice yourself for us. We already got one man did that. And they nailed him to a cross." Before Cash could respond, guards escorted Washington away. He would die 3 weeks later, peacefully in his sleep. His last words, according to the prison chaplain, were, "Tell Johnny Cash I was wrong. Keep coming back." The drive back to Memphis was silent. Luther and Marshall knew something had fundamentally changed in Cash that night. The songs he'd write after would be different, darker, more honest. The pills would get worse before they got better, as if he was trying to medicate against the truths he'd learned. Here's what you don't know about the aftermath. William Bible Bill Harrison began writing to Cash regularly, 12 letters over 6 years, each one containing stories about the men inside, their crimes, their regrets, their small redemptions. Cash kept every letter. They're now in a sealed archive at the Country Music Hall of Fame, not to be opened until 2057, 100 years after that night. But one letter, dated December 24, 1962, was different. Harrison knew he was dying. Lung cancer, probably from decades of prison tobacco. He wrote, "Johnny, you asked me once why I thought that concert mattered. Here's the truth. In 25 years, I'd forgotten I was more than my worst moment. That night, singing with 800 other forgotten men, I remembered I was a killer, yes, but I was also a brother who loved his sister, a man who could sing Amazing Grace and mean it. You didn't give us a concert. You gave us back our humanity, even if just for a few hours." Harrison died January 15, 1963. Cash was on tour in England and couldn't attend the prison memorial, but he sent a telegram that Warden Whitmore read aloud to the assembled inmates. "Bill Harrison told me the truth saves lives. He saved mine that night by showing me what my music could really do. I hope he's finally free." The official prison records list the October 7, 1957, concert as routine musical performance, no incidents. But the truth lived in the 800 men who were there. Marcus Powell, the one who broke down crying, became a prison counselor. He helped establish the first addiction recovery program in the Texas prison system. Frank Torres, the cop killer who comforted Powell, spent his remaining years teaching literacy to younger inmates. Before his execution in 1971, he asked that Cash's music be played at his funeral. It was Guard Captain Dale Richards, who almost started the riot, quit his job 6 months later. His son would later reveal that Richards said the concert made him realize he'd been seeing inmates as animals, not men. He became a prison reform advocate, working with Cash in the 1970s to improve conditions. But the most important legacy involves a 19-year-old inmate named James Dobson, serving 5 years for robbery. Dobson was in the back row that night, barely able to see Cash over the heads of other inmates. But he heard every word. Stop. This is crucial to understanding Cash's influence. Dobson had planned to kill himself that week. October 7th was going to be his last day. He'd already written his goodbye note, had stolen enough pills from the infirmary to do it. But after the concert, after hearing Cash talk about finding humanity in darkness, Dobson flushed the pills. He served his time. got out in 1960, and became a music teacher in Houston's poorest neighborhoods. Over 40 years, he taught thousands of at-risk kids to play guitar, using Cash's songs as teaching tools. He'd tell them about that night in Huntsville, about how music saved his life. In 2003, when Cash died, Dobson was invited to speak at a memorial service. He said, "Johnny Cash came to Huntsville thinking he was just playing a $50 gig. But he gave us something worth more than all the money in the world. He gave us permission to be human again. Every kid I've taught music to, every life that music has saved through my teaching, that's Johnny's legacy." That night in 1957, he didn't just play for 800 inmates. He played for thousands of people who weren't even born yet. The song Cash improvised that night, the one built from Harrison's words and Crawford's poem, was never officially recorded by Cash himself, but elements of it appeared in dozens of his later songs. Music historians have identified fragments in at least 15 different Cash recordings. A melody here, a lyrical theme there, like he was spending his entire career trying to reconstruct that moment of pure, spontaneous truth. In 1968, when Cash returned to perform at Folsom Prison, he told June Carter about Huntsville. She asked him why he kept going back to prisons when it clearly caused him pain. Because, Cash said, "A man named Bible Bill Harrison taught me that the difference between a sinner and a saint is that the saint knows he's a sinner. These men in prison, they know what they are. It's the rest of us who pretend we're different. I go back to remember that I'm no better than them, just luckier." Cash would perform in over 30 prisons during his career, but he never forgot Huntsville. In his autobiography, written decades later, he devoted just one paragraph to that night. But it's telling. October 7, 1957, Huntsville State Penitentiary. A man serving life for murder told me I didn't understand why people kill. He was right. After that night, I did, and I wished I didn't. The full truth about that concert remained hidden for decades. Inmates who were there rarely talked about it, as if it was too personal to share. Guards who witnessed it were bound by professional discretion. The only reason we know these details now is because of a 2019 doctoral dissertation by Jennifer Martinez, whose grandfather was Guard Captain Dale Richards. Martinez spent 5 years tracking down surviving witnesses, reviewing sealed records, and piecing together what really happened. Her conclusion: the October 7, 1957, concert at Huntsville State Penitentiary wasn't just a performance, it was a moment of radical grace. Johnny Cash, a 25-year-old pill-addicted country singer, and 800 convicted killers found something together that night: the possibility that redemption isn't about erasing the past, but about facing it honestly. The Texas Department of Corrections has no official comment on the concert. The warden's logs from that period were destroyed in a fire in 1973, but unofficial evidence exists everywhere: in the songs Cash would write, in the lives that were changed, in the letters archived and sealed. One final detail, discovered only recently: Cash's guitar from that night, the one with his blood on it from the broken string, was never cleaned. He kept the blood stain as a reminder. When he died, that guitar was found in his home studio, the dark stain still visible on the wood. Attached to it was a note in Cash's handwriting: Huntsville, 1957. The night I learned that music can't save anyone, but it can sit with them in their darkness. Sometimes that's enough. That guitar is now in a private collection, owned by an anonymous buyer who paid $2.3 million for it at auction. The only condition of the sale: it can never be restored or cleaned. The blood stays. This is the concert Johnny Cash never talked about publicly, the one that changed him from a country singer into something else: a voice for the voiceless, a light in the darkest places, a man who understood that grace isn't pretty, it's bloody and broken and real. 800 killers taught Johnny Cash how to sing about truth. He spent the rest of his life trying to live up to that lesson. And now you know what really happened. The night a young Johnny Cash walked into hell and found humanity there. The night William Bill Harrison's 45 Seconds changed music history. The night 800 condemned men sang Amazing Graces and meant every broken note. The night Johnny Cash became the Man in Black. Though he wouldn't wear the color for another decade, he was already carrying the darkness with him, transformed into something like hope. That's the story they buried in the archives. Now it's yours to remember.